In December, Japanese land troops captured the hill overlooking the city and started firing directly towards the Russian ships. Most of them were sunk. On January 2, 1905, the city fell and the majority of the Russian Pacific Navy was gone. Meanwhile, in May of 1904, the Russians decided to send 2 more squadrons from the Baltic and Black Seas in order to help the Pacific Fleet. The new fleet, commanded by Rozhdestvensky, managed to depart in October and was in Indochina by May of 1905. Rozhdestvensky had 7 old and 4 new battleships, alongside 6 cruisers and 9 destroyers. His plan was to move directly to Vladivostok via the Tsushima Straits. That gave Togo ample opportunity to repair his ships at Mesan and place his radio-equipped scout ships in a fashion that would allow him to learn about the inevitable Russian counterattack. By the time the 2nd Pacific Squadron reached the battle scene, it was in poor condition. On top of their low morale, the Russians did not have an opportunity to perform proper maintenance on their ships. On the night of May 26, 1905, the Russian fleet attempted to pass the Tsushima Strait in a thick fog, but was detected by the Japanese. At 4:55 a.m., Captain Narukawa of the Shinano Maru sent a wireless message to Togo, head of the Japanese Navy, and informed him about the Russian fleet nearby. This was a new technology at the time, and it enabled the Japanese to block the Russians very quickly. At 13:49, the engagement began. The Japanese combined fleet consisted of 5 battleships, 26 cruisers, 21 destroyers, and 43 torpedo boats. The Russians started firing on the leading Japanese ship, Mikasa, but the Japanese response on the flagship, Knyaz Suvorov, was more precise. By 14:45, Admiral Togo was able to cross the Russian T. This meant that the Japanese fleet was in a perpendicular position to the northward moving Russian fleet, allowing him to fire broadsides, while the Russians could only reply with their forward turrets. This was possible due to the superior speed of the Japanese ships, which could sustain 15 knots, while the Russian ships were able to reach only 14 knots in short bursts. In the first hour of the battle, the Japanese were able to sink the battleship Osliabya and significantly damage 2 others. Another battleship tried to break through towards Vladivostok. Admiral Togo maneuvered to change the engaged side. Part of his fleet took a course away from the Russian fleet and then turned around to fire on the left side of the Russian ships, which enabled the Japanese ships to have the same firepower as in the beginning of the battle. After 3 hours of heavy battle, the line of the Russian fleet was broken and disorganized. Rozhdestvensky was heavily injured and surrendered command to Rear Admiral Nibogatov. He wouldn't know about this until an hour later. The Japanese fleet took a parallel course with the Russians and managed to cross the Russian T again. Within 20 minutes of this engagement, 2 Russian battleships were sunk. The Russian fleet was devastated and the battle was effectively over. But Admiral Togo aimed for complete victory over the Russians in the Pacific, and thus sought to continue to chase the remainder of the Russian fleet, aiming to reach Vladivostok. 21 destroyers and 37 torpedo boats were employed to achieve complete victory over the Russians. Destroyers attacked the Russian vanguard, while the torpedo boats attacked from the east and south of the Russian fleet. The Japanese were able to surround the Russians and cause panic among their ranks. The night attacks had put a great strain on the Russians, as they had lost 2 battleships and 2 armored cruisers, while the Japanese had only lost 3 torpedo boats. In the morning of May 28th, Rear Admiral Nibogatov ordered the 6 remaining ships under his command to surrender. Japan was able to succeed in the Battle of Tsushima thanks to its more evolved gunnery, faster pace, and better use of the wireless telegraph, along with tactical superiority. His plan was to move directly to Vladivostok via the Tsushima Straits. That gave Togo ample opportunity to repair his ships at Mesan and place his radio-equipped scout ships in a fashion that would allow him to learn about the inevitable Russian counterattack. The Battle of Tsushima effectively ended the Russo-Japanese War in favor of Japan. For the first time in a very long period, an Asian power defeated a European powerhouse. This weakened the prestige of the Russian Empire, which was one of the key triggers of the Russian Revolution in 1905. Meanwhile, Japan solidified its place as a force to be reckoned with in the Pacific and Far East.